kind of booted him from this location. Not booted him, but he needed to be here. So
Thank you.
if you want to, you don't have to. I spoke with the commissioners before you came down, and I asked if it was okay if you made your presentation from this location.
Okay.
Because you're speaking to both the commissioners and the public.
Okay.
When you're at the podium, it's mostly directed at the commissioners, which is good. But whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay.
I remember that period. So there might be an opportunity to
Someone wants a pizza.
I hear you. Okay. Hey, good seeing you, Dan.
It's up to you, your comfort level.
Are we still meeting this
That's what I was
afternoon?
getting ready to tell you. No, we're not.
Oh, we're not? That's part of it.
To be sure to not move the table.
I also brought this. This is the zoning.
Oh, okay.
Next week for 2 weeks in newspaper term simulation. Should be published to be heard. Resolution table. And then this is a 2 weeks ago. Inspection.
Okay, so
This is where
Okay,
we are right
okay.
now. What you're gonna do after this meeting, and that's, do you have the board conditions, well, we see written protests. 40% of the real properties, representing 50% of the title ownership is property, so I hope we don't have any protests, but
Okay.
if we do, we'll have to figure out the percentages.
Okay. And only these people are allowed to protest.
Right, and only the zoning, no one can protest the text.
The TED, but only the zoning. Okay.
Yeah, only if you take it back.
And they wanted to stay in the zoning.
Yes.
Okay.
These are, yeah.
Okay, because, wait, Montana,
Yes.
I know that but she doesn't know. She wants to stay.
No, she wants to be part of the TED.
Sorry, she
She's not going to be a part of the stormwater district.
Okay, I know what you're saying.
So there's three things.
Okay,
And we're focused on the zoning and the TED. We have nothing today to do with the sewer.
with the stormwater, okay, because that will come later. Got it.
And that's a different, yeah. Which is still surprising to me, because I thought we had this one of the things that's really good.
I thought that they were just because in a positive way.
Yeah, and full court. This level. This one, I think he is for it. It's this CFO. Whatever more is the one that's basically. And I don't think it's that she doesn't. I think did you see those announcements? She goes on and on about housing. It sounds like it's for the self-village.
Brian, we had a conversation after she protested. Brian. And she, I said his take on it was mostly that she
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll open the meeting with public comment on any subject not on the agenda. Any public comment?
Good morning, my name is Debbie Randolph. Earlier this week at the commission meeting, Commissioner Obert said, and I quote, "We serve 6,000 people in this county and not all of them are on Facebook. Not all of them are able to come to this meeting because they are working. There's an awful lot of them, pretty loud, one-on-one, that are not making their voices heard. We serve them as well," unquote. I agree completely with Commissioner Obert. She went on to say that many people have told her, one-on-one, that they didn't support paying the $500 claim by Sheriff Meehan for the photos. If Commissioner Obert's statement is true, then I urge you to adjust your meeting schedule to allow comments to be heard publicly. It is the obligation of the entire commission to hear these views. If the commission truly wants to be transparent, I suggest you consider evening meetings, not even just one per month, not an extra meeting. Nobody wants to go to more meetings, but in place of one of your daytime meetings. Furthermore, it is not fair for the commission to diminish the value of comments made by those of us who are able to attend meetings with the excuse that other people can't come to the meetings, especially when the commission has the power to adjust meeting times to be more inclusive to the entire county. For those of us who are able to make daytime meetings, I remind you that our opinions have value and we care. If Commissioner Obert's statement is true, that people have expressed views to her personally, it is the obligation of the entire commission to hear those views. As Commissioner Obert said, the commission represents 6,000 people, not just those who are able to attend meetings. Changing the meeting times to accommodate those people would be a great step in the right direction in providing transparency to everyone in the county. I hope you will consider this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes. Bill.
So I might be breaking the rules a little bit, Jody Moore again, but I wanted to speak about law enforcement. And I know that the agenda today is about the TED, but one of the things I wanted to speak to separately is in regard to when I came and spoke to you all after Mason was killed. And this is directed to Commissioner Obert and Commissioner Delger. Do you remember when I spoke to you and asked you about prioritizing law enforcement?
Yeah.
Do you remember what you told me in that meeting when I asked you if you would commit to that? Do you remember what you said?
That we would fund law enforcement as much as we possibly can.
That you would commit to prioritizing law enforcement?
Yes.
Commissioner Obert, do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. So do you feel like you've done that?
To the extent of our financial ability, yes.
So one of the questions that I have is with regard to the increased growth in the southern end of the county. And what you will be discussing in a minute is how do you feel that we're going to be able to take care of those people with emergency services, law enforcement. How do you feel like we're going to be able to take care of those people to protect them, not only those people, but also our law enforcement and our first responders that work in those areas? How do you feel like we're going to be able to do that with increased growth with the way that you're currently funding law enforcement?
We have applied for several grants through the DES to build a facility down there with land that the people who were doing the development have basically set aside for us. We're hoping we have a team from MSU Architecture working on a building plan that we are working through. I believe it's a USDA grant for a facility to house ambulance, fire, and law enforcement down there. We'll also have facilities for the officers who are on duty. We'll have an office for them and some like temporary living quarters, so if they're through a shift they have a place to kind of go to.
So you have facilities, or you're working on facilities through grants, but you don't have people. So you also need to consider funding the people. So
Yes.
what are your thoughts with that?
Well, we are in discussions with possibly hopefully getting a public safety mill levy passed. If we can take that to the voters and get that passed, it's there's two options there. We can do a countywide mill levy, or we could actually set up a public safety district down there that would mean that those individuals in that part of the county would pay more into a public safety district would still be underneath control of the sheriff, but those taxes paid in that district would go strictly to law enforcement within that district. So an officer that we funded there would be primarily assigned to that area as the officer is that we have right now, but we would, hopefully, if we could get that passed, the district or the state or the county-wide, then we could put another officer in that area.
So currently, though, the finances that are going to the law enforcement, would that money change then when the mill levy comes, or will they still continue to get that amount of money?
The mills, or I'll try to explain this the best I can. The mills would stay where they're at right now, with the exception of if the state, like this last year, the state cut like 3 mills, which amounted, I think, to like 1.8% or something. So everybody's budget the mills got cut by that much, but the value of the mill actually amounted to, I think, a $37,000 increase. So it depends on what the state does with our mills, because the state will cut mills or add mills depending on our growth. So if they're cut mills, then every department that gets mills gets a proportional cut as to the amount that we got cut. But because you cut mills doesn't necessarily mean you cut financial funding,
Sure,
because the
and
value of the mills goes up.
Sure, and I understand that you have to allot money to the departments that you are responsible for based on what the state gives you with regard to mills. I understand that.
Yes.
But what I'm asking is that gonna change if a public safety mill levy passes? Is that gonna change what you three then determine comes down from the state and is given to law enforcement? Because is that going to, basically what I'm asking is, are you going to then take the funds that you're currently giving to law enforcement? Are you gonna then decrease those funds because of public safety mill levy passed?
No, if the public votes for, say, a 10 mil increase for public safety, we're not gonna go back and cut 10 mills out and spread it out among the general fund. We would still maintain all the mills that we have in public safety right now, but they would get the additional 10 mills. And the additional 10 mills, if the public passed that, are only allowed to go to public safety.
So another question I had is, you said that you all had applied for a grant
Yeah.
for the facilities out there. Who actually applied for that grant? Did the county apply for that?
Mr. Conkey did, through the DES services.
So Mr. Conkey applied for that, or MBAC applied for that grant?
Mr. Conkey did, I believe. I believe it was through MBAC. MBAC kind of told us about the grant, but I believe Mr. Conkey did apply for that.
But we signed it, so it's actually a commission grant.
So the commission signed it, but Mr. Conkey was kind of the guy that's running the grant.
So is that grant, though, facilitated through MBAC?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So one of the other questions I had, and I just wanted to, I know this is in regard to what's on the agenda, but my concern for the TED is how that's going to impact law enforcement and public safety and first responders. And so I just want to make sure that I again reiterate to you all that I feel that law enforcement and public safety needs to be a priority with you three. And from my perspective, I don't feel like it is. So that's the end of my statement. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, so we will close the commissioners' meeting and open the public hearing. Intent to adopt a resolution to create the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning District and Regulation. The resolution of intent to create the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning District and adopt the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning Regulation with map. Whereas the 2003 Broadwater County Growth Policy Plan, the growth policy, was duly adopted by the Broadwater County Commission pursuant to 761601 MCA, and whereas the Commission has concerns that the inability to address infrastructure deficiencies in the industrial commercial area of an in Wheatland Consensus Designated Place, the CDP, has stymied the location, growth, and retention of secondary value-adding industries, And whereas Broadwater County has decided to embark on the process to create a targeted economic development district, TED, for the purpose of addressing infrastructure deficiencies in the area to encourage the location, growth, and retention of secondary value-adding industries, which has been found pursuant to resolution number 219-4 to be necessary in the interest of public health, safety, or welfare of the residents of Broadwater County, and would enable Broadwater County to better meet the goals and objectives of the growth policy as provided in parts 715, 4201, and 4301 Montana Code Annotated, the state's urban renewal law, and whereas pursuant to 715, 4279 MCA, a TED must be zoned for use pursuant 762-201 MCA in accordance with the growth policy. And whereas for the commission to proceed with the creation of a TED, a zoning district and regulation must be established for the Wheatland industrial commercial areas. And whereas the Broadwater County has had the Broadwater County Wheatland area zoning district and regulation with map prepared. And whereas the boundary of the district encompasses about 325 acres and is located along US Highway 287, just north of the Interstate 90 Highway 287 intersection. The boundaries include portions of section 15 and 16, Township 2 North, Range 1 East, Broadwater County, Montana. About 2/3 of the acreage is located on the east side of US Highway 287. A strip comprised of less than 100 acres is located along the west side of US Highway 287 and extends from I-90 north to Wheatland Road. And whereas the general character of the regulation is to provide for an industrial, commercial site in accordance with the growth policy, with the intent and purpose of establishing an industrial area for secondary value-adding businesses which are manufacturing, processing, producing, or creating by change the form of raw materials or intermediate products into more valuable products or commodities that are capable of being sold or traded in interstate commerce. And technology-based businesses that, through the employment of knowledge or labor, add value to a product, process, or export service resulting in the creation of new wealth, and to set forth minimum standards for development. Whereas the boundary of the district and the regulation were submitted to the planning board for review, and on June 10, 2019, the planning board extended an advisory recommendation finding that the boundary of the district and the regulation is appropriate and is in accordance with state statutes and the relevant land use designations, goals, objectives, and implementation of growth policy, and recommending that the commissioner create the district and adopt regulations. And whereas notice in accordance and required by state law was posted and published, and whereas the commission held a public hearing on October 11, 2019 to consider creation of the district and adoption of the regulation. And whereas the Broadwater County Board of Commissioners finds that in accordance with 76-201 MCA, for the purpose of promoting the public health, safety, morals, general welfare, it is the intent to create the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning District and adopt the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning Regulation with the map for the district. Now therefore be it resolved, in accordance with 76-205 MCA, notice of passage of the resolution of intention shall be published once a week for 2 weeks in a newspaper of general circulation within Broadwater County. In accordance with 76-205 MCA, for 30 days after first publication of notice, the commission will accept written protests to the creation of the zoning district or to the zoning regulations from persons owning real property within the district whose name appear on the last completed assessment roll of the county. In accordance with 76-205 MCA, within 30 days after the expiration of the protest period, the commission may pass the resolution creating the zoning district and adopting the zoning resolution. The resolution for final creation and adoption will be scheduled for the commission and proper notice given at that date. Any public comment? Yes.
Sean Gifford on the mayor's reports.
Commissioner, can we talk before this or not?
Yeah,
Yeah, we should probably make a presentation
I
before.
can't hear you.
Oh, is it, we thought maybe we should make a presentation explaining this before you have the public comment, is,
Okay,
if you don't, and with all respect, I think that might be.
I'm good with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You want me to wait then?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
please, okay. I think I'll go over here.
Thank you very much, Chairman Delger and members of the commission. I'm Janet Cornish, and I'm under contract with, to assist the county, Broadwater County, in taking you through the process to create the Wheatland zoning district and the targeted economic development district. This morning, we're actually going through two steps. As Commissioner Delger explained, Delger, excuse me, explained the, and reading the resolution, is that it is required prior to the creation of the TED that the area to be considered has to be zoned in accordance with the growth policy. So this first hearing and resolution is on the resolution of intent to adopt a zoning regulation for the area that also coincides with the area that will be the TED. So this is the first step in the process. The second hearing, which will be after this one, will be actually about the creation of the TED. The zoning intent, as the Commissioner explained, is passed at this meeting, but then begins a 30-day protest period. The state of Montana sets out the conditions for what a protest would be that would constitute delaying it. There are 7 property owners within this district, and those are the property owners that have the right to protest the creation of the zoning district. After that 30-day period expires and there has not been an adequate protest, then the commission can move with the adoption of the regulation. But in the order of things today, and then again on November 18th, which will be our second set of meetings, the zoning has to be addressed before we can address the TED. So, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Janet, can you explain how the taxing works with the TED? Is there a reduction? Does the TED just kind of keep the taxes where they're at? Can you explain how that whole picture works?
Sure, absolutely. So the tax increment financing is a provision that the state enables communities to use within a TED or an urban renewal district. And simply, it has nothing to do with the amount of taxes that are collected. It's only the way those taxes are distributed once they're collected. So if no development occurs in that area, the taxes continue to be collected as they always were and distributed to the various taxing jurisdictions. If there is any increase in taxable value within that area, just the increased portion, just the incremental increase, that portion of the taxes is segregated from the rest of the fund and is used to invest, in this case, in public infrastructure, public services for the area. But the taxpayers see no difference. So the taxpayers pay what they would have paid irrespective of whether or not there's a targeted economic development district. It's once they pay. So if a company or a business comes into the area and now is paying taxes in that area and was not before, those tax dollars would be directed to this fund for infrastructure improvement. If an existing business were to expand, just the amount of taxes that are attributed to that expansion would go into the special fund. And it's all of the taxes that are collected against the entire mill levy, with the exception of the 6 mill university levy. Or if there's a levy like Commissioner Delger described, where you would have an additional mills that would be for law enforcement, that was passed after the district was created, those 10 mills would all be available to the law enforcement. So they wouldn't be counted in the increment, which I think is, given the comments we heard earlier, I think is important to stress. That money would not go to the increment, because the Montana legislature in the last session said if you vote in a mill levy after the district is created, those voted mill levies go to the purpose in which the voters supported. So again, it's not the amount of taxes that the taxpayer pays, that's determined by the taxable value of the property. It's more about what happens after those taxes are collected and how they are distributed for use. Just hope that was clear.
Yeah, thank you.
So, but again, the second hearing in particular will be about the TED, and this is just about the land use piece of it. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I guess one thing too, I wanted to mention is, I think it's important for people to know that one of the regulations in the zoning is that there can be no dwellings or,
Well, thank you for, yes.
housing within that district.
Yeah.
It needs to be outside of the district.
That's correct.
Which makes sense. You wouldn't want to have housing in a commercial or industrial area.
Thank you, Commissioner, for keeping me on track there. Yes, there's, as Commissioner Folkvord has pointed out, the zoning allows commercial and industrial uses, but not dwellings. Now, if there's a caretaker, for example, that would be attached, where the dwelling unit would be attached to a business or a dormitory for police or fire station, that would be allowed. But it's those housing units that are, residential area type units that would be, have to be located outside the district. It could certainly be adjacent to it, but not within the boundary. Okay, thank you. Thanks so much.
Mr. Gifford.
I'm Sean Gifford, Mayor of Three Forks. I'd like to thank the Commission for letting me speak today. I'm going to read the memorandum that I've given the County Commission. It's my opinion that Broadwater County has failed to provide adequate law enforcement for the residential subdivision in this area. The lack of Broadwater County law enforcement presence has burdened Gallatin County and the City of Three Forks to provide a law enforcement presence. Beyond law enforcement, Broadwater County enacted a TED will have an economic incentive for pulling businesses out of the City of Three Forks and placing a tax base in Broadwater County. Further, it will encourage commercial industrial business to build outside of the Three Forks municipal limits in the TED area. It encourages the change of open agricultural land to commercial industrial business that is contrary to Broadwater's growth plan. The plan as presented for the TED would use the increased taxable value to construct roads, water, sewer facilities, and a grant will be used to construct a new emergency services building. The plan on page 15, fire protection, states goal 3 is to encourage Broadwater County Rural Fire District to have adequate firefighting capabilities. Broadwater County Rural Fire is separate and distinct from the Three Forks Rural Fire, which provides service in the TED area. The plan on page 16, goal 5, is to encourage new growth to locate near existing communities where the services can be provided and provide incentives to encourage new development to locate near existing communities. The TED will accomplish the opposite, as it will encourage growth outside of the city. The encouragement of the TED building its own sewer service eliminates that growth from helping the citizens of Three Forks to pay for current state-of-the-art facilities. The City of Three Forks and the Three Forks Rural Fire District have shared the cost of services, shared firefighters, and paid for insurance and retirement for those good people. Proposing to build a new fire station in this area will force the City of Three Forks to bear the burden of providing fire service on its own. That will increase the cost of Three Forks citizens to provide the same service. In that way, the proposed TED also harms Three Forks. The school is already at capacity and struggles to meet the facilities and faculty needs. By redirecting the increased tax value to pay for water and sewer facility is not in the school's best interest. Those same businesses could seek to locate in Three Forks, connect to existing facilities, and not take the school's increased tax value and tax revenue. If the school was to seek volunteer remittance agreements, those remittance funds are only allowed to reduce the property tax payments or designated reserves. While the school should think strongly about remittance agreements, the statutory remittance plan does not make the school whole if there is any unspent money. I do not support the TED as proposed, as it will negatively affect the city of Three Forks. Do you have any questions for me, Commissioners? Janet?
I have no, except we're talking about the zoning regulation here, not the TED.
Right. I just want the commission to know my feelings on the TED.
Okay.
I think that's kind of nuances here. We are speaking about the same area, and I'm letting the commission know my concerns, as we already subsidize a lot of emergency services in that area from the city of Three Forks. We pay more than our fair share into the fire district. I think we're only receiving about $12,800 from Broward County for fire protection, while the people on the other side of the river are paying $140,000 a year. Thank you guys for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am? Yes, sir. My name is Dennis Nelson, Mr. Commissioner and Madam, ladies. I'm here representing the Three Forks Rural Fire District. In support of Sean Gifford's letter, I'm just going to single out the one paragraph that he handed to you, ladies and gentlemen. The city of Three Forks and the Three Forks Rural Fire District have shared the costs of services, shared firefighters, and paid for insurance and retirement for these good people in this area. Proposing to build a new fire station in this area will force the city of Three Forks to bear the burden of providing fire services on its own. It will increase the cost for Three Forks citizens to provide the same service. This is again for the city of Three Forks. In that way, the proposed TED also harms Three Forks. And specifically, it harms the remainder of the Three Forks Rural Fire District, the majority of which is supported by Gallatin County taxpayers, probably on the 10-to-1 basis that Sean just mentioned from a dollar mill levy standpoint. Because remember that the Three Forks Rural Fire District is a joint fire district. We run probably 90 miles total length from Highway 1 or from milepost 101 all the way to Black Ford on the Madison River. We run from Logan, basically Logan on the interstate, to the Jefferson County line. So we've got a joint support area that we need to cover, and the Rural Fire District is being forced to and asked to support the impacts of the huge building boom that's going on in the south end of the Broadwater County. So with that, I recommend that you consider that as you make your decisions. And do you have any questions for me? Thank you very much for your time, ladies and gentlemen. Yes.
Steph Cameron, I'm a school board trustee from Three Forks. I have a question specifically about the zoning.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Steph Cameron from
Oh, okay.
Three Forks School Board. Specifically with the zoning and the assessment of how things work. If everything is considered ag at this point, and that's what we're receiving taxable value from, with the zoning changed, would it go into commercial? Would it be taxed as commercial property?
Mr. Chairman, may I answer?
Yes.
Yes, thank you for your question. The property does not change its assessment until it's put into different use. So any property that's in the district that continues to be agriculture will continue to be taxed at that rate.
Okay.
That's what the zoning essentially does, is it enables land to be put into those uses, but it does not change the taxation in of itself.
Okay.
It's only when those uses change that the property would then be taxed at a commercial or industrial rate.
So when there's any infrastructure added to the lots, then it would be considered commercial? I'm just clarifying.
I mean, it kind of will go hand in hand. The commercial development is going to pay for the infrastructure.
No, I mean, like, even if a business moved in and started building a building, would that be considered when they started?
Yes, that's
Okay.
what it started.
Okay.
So thank you. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so until that happens, it's still gonna be considered ag?
Yes,
Okay, even though it's zoned commercial.
even though it's zoned commercial. It's
Yes.
not the land use designation, it's the actual use that's occurring at the time
Okay.
of the assessment.
That's my only question on that.
Thank you.
So Jan, if we're zoning this as, for the TED as commercial, so, but that change in taxable value won't take place until the TED is completely, is expired or built out, right? So,
Right, so just a little, I would express it this way, that you can draw a line around an area and say it's a TED, but nothing changes in terms of its taxable value or the method in which the Department of Revenue uses to value the land until there's a business on it. So if there's a business in 1/10 on the land, it's just that business that then will be taxed at a commercial or industrial rate. The rest of the land will continue to be taxed at an ag rate. It's only when the use changes on a particular parcel, not for the whole area. So each of the 7 parcels in the district would continue to pay tax at the same rate it's paying now, unless there's a change of use.
Janet, can you also speak to when the zoning and the TED district sunset is on that?
The zoning district does not have a sunset on it.
Right.
The TED has a 15-year sunset, but it can be extended. If, for example, you sell a bond, you would create a debt that is being paid annually by the increment. So then that would extend the life. So let's say, Bridger Brewing does locate its plant there, and its taxes, its increase in taxes, the taxes that it's paying will represent an increase to the county. Those funds will be used to retire the debt on the sewer. If the state said you can extend a district like this for 25 years in order to cover the debt. But without any debt obligation, it sunsets in 15 years.
15 years.
For the TED, but the zoning district has no expiration date.
you said that the TED would terminate in 15. Can it be terminated earlier?
Yes. Yeah, if you got everything done you wanted to get done in 10 years, you can terminate it. What we have found across the state is it usually takes 4, 5, 6 years before you're starting to see any increment of any size. This might come on board more quickly. By that time, and then you might need to sell a bond in order to, finance it, and then that would extend it. But the 15 years seems to have, we used to have it at 10 years in the state law, but it was changed to 15 because so many districts really didn't take off in the first few years.
So when you say that you've accomplished everything that you want, that you want to accomplish, is the list of what you want to accomplish established at the very at the very moment that you set the TED? Is that plan in place to say that we're going this far with this TED and then that's the end of it?
No, because that's a good question. The reason, what we typically do in the plans and what most communities do is they don't set those kind of limits because you never know when an opportunity might come. Let's say if you knew everything today that was going to happen, you could do that. But let's say in year 7, a furniture plant wanted to locate there, and all of a sudden they had need for more fiber optics, let's say, or for a different, a rail spur. You wouldn't want to limit yourselves in taking advantage of that opportunity. So what we do instead is say these are the kinds of things that Broadwater County would like to use, not just tax increment fund, but other funds. You can also apply for grants or other, special districts, whatever you'd like to do. You may learn something in 2027 that you didn't know in 2020. So I typically, you don't want to hem yourself in too tightly, which would then limit your ability to take advantage of other opportunities further down the road. So, but communities have said we are at year 10. We feel at this point in time that, the district, maybe you've filled it. There's no other opportunity. It's time to return, to start sharing that additional taxes with all the other taxing jurisdictions, and we're done. So, but I think it would be, given the opportunities and economic situation is changing so rapidly, it would probably be not as effective to decide at this point in time what would trigger the end, other than the statutory requirements.
Hi, I'm Amber Hargrove. I'm here representing the Antelope Vista subdivision out in the Wheatland area.
What was your first name again?
Amber
Amber?
Hargrove.
Thank you.
And we would like to protest the zoning area and the TED, because in the last 2 years, the roads in the area have been graded once. And I understand that you guys actually dropped your budget. Is that correct, for the road department this year on your budget? No, that's not correct, okay. But you don't seem to be able to handle the roads you already have. So if you're putting in more roads in this area, then you're not gonna be able to get to anyone else either. So if you don't have the money and the funds, you're gonna affect the roads in the whole Broadwater County. And also, I was curious, who asked for this zoning district? Did the people in that zoning district ask for it?
It's a requirement by the state to have a zoning district within it. Ted?
Oh, because, so you're making the zoning district because of the TED?
Yeah, that's a requirement.
Okay. And who asked for the TED? The Bridge Brewing, or who
No,
decided
yes.
that was a good idea for the TED?
So here's something that I hope everybody understands. As a commission, we're responsible to
Sure.
look at long-range plans for our county and ways to increase revenue. And this is one mechanism that we're looking down the road in, rather than just sometime a short term, something that will be long-term, that will last the lifetime of the county and for our residents. So that was the reason that we're looking at this.
Okay. And has anybody done any water study on the area, as far as not runoff, but is there even water there to accept this, and will the sewer work when it goes? So shouldn't you guys have to pay to do all those to start before you actually vote on saying, yes, this is where it needs to be? Okay, thank you for your time.
Any other comment?
Matt Bugman, I'm a new Broadwater County resident, out on the Three Forks side. I'd like to ask, is anybody on the commission, do you guys live on that end of Broadwater County?
No.
No?
I don't.
Nobody on the commission does?
I live close. I live down by south of Tosca, so.
Okay.
So I'm your
I mean,
representative. I'm your representative.
You're my representative.
Yeah, so you can yell at me.
Yeah, I mean, I know if I was putting a place together and I was gonna put the stuff that I didn't want in my town, bundled up right next to me, I'd put it as far away from me as possible. I'd push my septic right next to my neighbor, I'd push my burn pit right to my neighbor at the other end. I mean, it does bring growth to the county, it brings income, but everybody that's sitting on that end of the county went there to kind of be free from that. You know, wanted to be away from industry and development. That traffic there right now, I mean, I will speak to the law enforcement now that you guys have pushed one deputy out there. The couple hours a day that he's able to spend at the interchange at I-90 and 287, you guys got to increase ticket revenue like 20-fold. Thank God. Because driving an ambulance through that, I get cut off by semi-trucks on a daily basis. I don't want more of it. I don't want more development down there anyway. I understand it's interstate and it's interstate thoroughfare, but most everybody that moved out there to get away from that. I mean, I'm actually moving out there from the Willow Creek Three Forks side, but it's not what everybody was hoping for on that end. I look at the same part of zoning and development, moving towards that, Ted, the things that need to happen for that side of the county. I can't think of how many people out there are part of the volunteer fire service, volunteer fire department, or anything else. So putting a station out there, I don't know how you get the manpower to man the station. I think that's gonna be more amusing than anything else. But to try and see what comes of it, I don't know. It seems like everybody's making a buck off of somebody other's end. So, that's my statement on it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question. I'm not sure I understood the answer to, I think it was Amber's question about the roads. What is the plan if this is all passed and happens? Because we do know there are road issues, especially out there. In the next budget, will you increase the road planning budget? Or where will that money come from to take care of those roads with more usage? Maybe I missed that.
All of that infrastructure in there is paid for by the developers and by the taxes that they pay.
Okay, so that will be covered by the,
It's part of the TED, yes. The tax money that the county is not receiving is spent on the infrastructure inside the TED,
so that will cover the roads as well?
yes.
Perfect, thank you.
I have a quick question. Just regarding the assessed valuation. Let's assume that your taxes are frozen as of January 1, 2020, and this goes into operation. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but your commercial appraisals occur every 6 years, is that correct? As opposed to residential that occur every 2 years. When you put in a particular commercial business into this area, and that tax, is that commercial business then evaluated immediately, or is that tax base held for 6 years, or until, whatever the time frame is, it doesn't make any difference? Or does it run for that first 2 years or 6 years, whatever it is, and then become additional tax money available to the county?
Mr. Chairman, may I answer that? Whatever, if there's any development work, let's say they just put a foundation in, that will be picked up on the next year's tax rolls. It happens right away.
It does happen right
Right,
away.
and so with this particular district, if it's passed, it will have a base year of 2019, which means that anything that came in, and if anything was improved after January 1st of this year, it would become part of the increment. But to get specifically to your question, it's my understanding that the Department of Revenue comes in as soon as there's any new, they don't wait the 6 years or the 2 years to capture any additional. And I think they're actually changed it, and they're doing it more often anyway than the 6. I think they've changed the appraisal cycle. But regardless, they always come in if there's any improvements made. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you're going from bare ground to a foundation, or a foundation to a superstructure, that's picked up when it occurs.
That, I understand that, but then I'll refer back to the residential assessments that have been occurring in Broadwater County over the last 15 or 20 years that this explosion has occurred down there. And from what I'm hearing, and believe me, it's hearsay, so don't take me to the bank on this, but from what I'm hearing is you've got houses that are being lived in south end of Broadwater County that are still taxed on an agricultural basis. Now that may or may not be correct information, but I direct that comment to not only the county planner, but also to your county commissioners, that if that be a fact, then you're saying that the state assessor is going to come in and assess immediately. I beg to differ if this be a fact in South End of Broadwater County. Because again, because of the huge impact. I understand that there's a huge impact on the growth. But is that gonna happen in
I
first year,
can't-
or is it gonna happen in
Yeah,
sixth
I
year?
don't, I can't speak to the case
And I
that you
can't either, but
mentioned.
the issue is
But the
still out there,
Department
that's
of,
going
yeah,
on.
the Department of Revenue works with us on creating these districts.
Right.
So its assessors would be certainly aware that this was taking place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've never, in the work I've done, in helping about 36 communities, rural, many of them rural, set up these districts, the Department of Revenue has indeed appraised and assessed the property as soon as it comes on the tax rolls. That's been my experience, but I can't speak to this
And
case.
I agree with you, and I can't speak to it totally either. It was just my question, open to investigation and research beyond this. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Dennis. Mr. Chair, I can answer some of those questions.
Yes.
Okay. And Steph Cameron, I'm Three Forks School Board Trustee. I was the former secretary of the Gallatin County Tax Appeal Board. And so I can answer some of these questions if you don't mind. Everybody, Jenny, everybody's on a 2-year roll now. There's no more 6s. It's commercial, it's residential, it's everybody. So January 1, 2019 was the beginning of a 2-year cycle. And if there's improvements on a property that they can see, they will come back and reassess January 1, 2020. So mid-cycle, they'll come back and they'll look at it again. And then you'll start another tax roll 2021. They'll reassess again. So DOR should be aware of anything that's going on. They look, they drive around. They're really short-staffed right now, and I believe that the Gallatin County DOR office is actually assessing for Broadwater also. They kind of consolidated their zones. But they should be aware of any new construction, whether it's residential, commercial, whatever it is, they always have their eyes open. They're looking at Google Maps, any new, action with the treasurer's office. So I hope that kind of answers some questions. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Go ahead.
My name is Jeff Elliott, and I'm the superintendent of schools in Three Forks County. Three Forks Schools. When the TED was in talks, there were some meetings that were to be had, and with I believe it was MBEC that asked to have these meetings. I was not contacted to be at a meeting. I happened to be at a meeting that the head of MBEC, I'm also a member of the Chamber of Commerce in Three Forks, and I'm also a member of Civic and Economic Development Group in Three Forks. Mr. Obert actually just happened to be at a meeting, shared that information. But one of my worries is that you are to provide financial information on how this TED is going to impact the local school district. I have seen nothing how this TED is going to impact my district. And I will tell you right now, based on if you're taxing that agricultural land at what it is now, and in 1 year or 2 years, we have a brand new brewery there and an amphitheater, that is going to be taxed at a higher rate. That's the amount, that percentage increase that will be taxed now will be missing out in Three Forks schools. We're in a position where our high school was built in 1952. We're teaching classes, English classes in an auditorium. We've gained 60 students in a Class B school since last count. I will say this, the owners of the brewery they're great people, and they came with our mayor and saw our situation and saw how desperate we are. My fear is that believe me, I support growth, and I think growth is inevitable. We understand that, but I think growth has to be done adequately and correctly. And I think if we're going to offer the TED district, I think we're not keeping in mind the students and the kids of Three Forks schools. I think you're by not having them pay that incremental amount in taxes, in 5 years you have a brand new brewery that's serving all these people, and we're still not seeing any tax revenue from that. That's wrong. That's wrong to do to those kids. And when we're still teaching classes in portables, or we're teaching classes in an English class in an auditorium. And I completely understand. I have no, it's Broadwater County and you can do what you want. But that is also in our school district. And I just wanted to show you that and to make the statement that it's, I wish that you would, the commission and people who have developed the TED would have reached out and talked to us. Because I think that they need to play their equitable share. That's part of living in Montana. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead, Joe.
Jody Moore, I just had a really quick follow-up question to something that Amber asked. One of the things that I guess I'm confused about is, was the TED planned before Bridger Brewing, or was Bridger Brewing coming and then the TED was planned? Is there, like, what is the timeline there?
So I can't, so, I think as part of the county's efforts to engage in economic development, it was the thought of creating the TED is, and correct me if I'm wrong, commissioners, but it's my understanding that in order to get Bridger Brewing to come to Broadwater County, the TED was offered as a means to enable the infrastructure that was needed. And I understand exactly where you're going. The chicken and the egg is always a very important point. And to Superintendent Elliott's point, that you are, without Bridger Brewing, without the TED, there's no new taxes. So the point was to take a more long-term view, I guess, to say, if we are able to have this kind of investment in our county, and which will pay for its own infrastructure rather than the county have to digging into its existing coffers. But this is where that the business itself, the business isn't getting a break. In other words, the business still has to pay its taxes. But those taxes go for the infrastructure. Without that infrastructure, the county wouldn't be able to have attracted them. And then what we're left with as a county, what Broadwater County now has, is that infrastructure in place without having to burden the rest of the taxpayers with that cost. So the theory of tax increment financing is to take the long-term view, that you're, in the long term, you're going to be able to have more tax base to support schools, to support roads. But you're doing that where I always call it delayed gratification, where you're getting this new business, but you're not recognizing those taxes for a number of years, but those new tax dollars are going into the infrastructure that will benefit the county as a whole. And in the long term, the school district and the first responders. But it takes a long time. One of my colleagues who works in economic development in communities that depend on timber has said it took 40 years for the timber industry to decline in Montana. It's going to take at least that long to rebuild some of our resource-based communities. In a place like Broadwater County, where you've all been talking about the lack of tax base to support law enforcement and first responders, it's going to take some time to build up that tax base to begin to support them again. So coming back to your question, it was a tool that Broadwater County decided to use in order to attract Bridger Brewing. Without that tool in place, Bridger Brewing would not have a way, or the county would not have a way to pay for the infrastructure.
Do we know, can I ask you guys, do we know if, has Bridger Brewing purchased that property yet? Do we know, or is that something we don't know? So one of the other questions I have, just as with transparency with numbers, how much money has the county spent as far as hiring this lady right here, I'm assuming